Hello guys, welcome back to R6 Esports Insider. Today we're going to answer the question of who is the greatest Siege Dynasty. The two rosters we'll be looking at will be the Penta/G2 and W7M/Furia rosters. We'll first look at both the teams' histories, and then we'll compare and contrast to figure out who is the greatest dynasty in Siege's history.
Before I start the video, I wanted to tell y'all I got a Twitter page with the same name. Over there I give updates for all the league games and predictions, so if you're interested, give me a follow. The link is down in the description. Now onto the video.
Penta has been known arguably for the longest time the greatest team ever in Siege's history. They first started way back in 2016 by winning the first Pro League finals ever, after winning the first Europe League ever, with the roster of Pingu, Rendir, Kerp, S4I, and Ovi. But Penta missed the next two Pro League finals after that, as well as the first Six Invitational in 2017. After that though, that's when Penta decided to flip the script by picking up an entire new roster outside of Pingu, with the pickups of Fabian, Goga, Yunus, KS, and Falco. And also the greatest coach ever in Shas. Penta decided to do a six-man team, which was common back then since you could swap players depending on maps, not opponents. But Penta had a resurgence after these pickups by winning Europe League again and winning the Pro League finals against Black Dragons. They didn't stop there though. They won the next Pro League finals after dropping Falco. They looked unstoppable, but the next Pro League finals was set in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Penta did win the European League again, and they won their quarterfinals match against Mantis, but in the semifinals they had to go against the crowd favorites in Black Dragons, and that caused them to get knocked out of the finals, and a chance to win their third Pro League finals in 1 year, and their fourth all time. Penta knew that there was no time to gloom over this loss, as they had the biggest event coming up in the Six Invitational 2018. Going into SI 2018, Penta made a roster move, and that was the dropping of KS and the pickup of Shate, who was coming over from Ints, who just won their last Pro League finals. Penta looked great in groups and won their first two bracket games over Ints and Black Dragons, which those two teams were in the grand final of the last Pro League final. But they had another big test, and that was Evil Geniuses. This team was the team that won the last Six Invitational when they were known as Continuum, and they had Canadian, which is arguably one of the greatest players of all time. Penta dropped the first two maps against EG, as it looked like Canadian was going to win another SI, but Penta won the next two maps to push it to Coastline, and each team went back and forth. But Pingu pulled off the greatest 1v2 clutch ever to solidify themselves as the best team in the world. But Penta didn't stop there, as they won yet another Europe League, and their third out of the last four to be exact, and going into the Pro League finals, they had to pick up Canto Ricchetti from Ints, because Shate couldn't make it for personal reasons. But that didn't stop them, as they made it all the way to the grand final against Liquid. But Liquid beat Penta in surprising fashion to show that Penta was beatable. After the Atlantic City Pro League finals loss, the Penta roster got picked up by the famous G2 Esports, with the official addition of Kanto to the roster. So this roster was under a new banner going into the Paris Major, which was the second biggest event for Siege behind SI. And of course, G2 dominated this tournament, with them only dropping one map in the entire major against Maka Esports of all teams. After this win, I think everyone knew that G2 wasn't going to slow down anytime soon, and they didn't, with them dominating Europe League yet again with only one loss. And then they dominated and won their fourth Pro League finals over FaZe Clan. This team wasn't done just yet, as they won DreamHack Winter 2018 to camp off the year over their former organization in Penta. That win was the setup to the Six Invitational 2019, and with this event, G2 could be the first roster to win two SIs. G2 dominated the group stage without them dropping a single map, but G2 ran into a little bit of a brick wall in the quarterfinals game against SSG, with Space Station winning the first map in a thrilling 8-7 to put the best team in the world on the brink. But G2 overcame the deficit to win the next two maps 7-3 and 7-5 respectively. After that, G2 breezed by reciprocity by winning both maps 7-2, and in the grand final against Empire, G2 had a very tough test, especially on the first map of Coastline, which became the longest game in Siege's history, with the 12-10 scoreline in G2's favor. After that though, Empire ran out of gas, and G2 smoked them on the next two maps to win their second hammer. After the 2019 Six Invitational, it looked like nobody was ever going to beat this team, at least not anytime soon. But in the next Europe League, G2 could not close out games, with them having a league high of 6 ties, and that costed them to miss the next Pro League finals in Milan. After missing the Pro League finals, they decided to make a roster move, with the dropping of Yunus and the addition of Uno before the Raleigh Major. In Raleigh, G2 looked like themselves, with them yet again not dropping a map in groups, and them dominating TSM and Team Forza in the quarterfinals and the semifinals. But in the grand finals, G2 had a rematch of SI against Empire, and Empire came out swinging with them winning the first map. But on map 2, G2 made it a game. After that, Empire just took over to win the major 3-1. G2 may have lost the grand final in Raleigh, but they looked back in form. But we were wrong, as they fell short again to make the Pro League finals, with them getting 3rd place in Europe yet again. After that, SI 2020 was coming up, and G2 didn't even qualify for it yet. But Ubisoft gave them a special invitation for them since they were the reigning champs. But this time they dropped Goga and picked up Sir Boss. G2 looked good in groups with wins over Reciprocity and BDS, but a loss to Fnatic in the upper bracket and a loss to NIP in the lower knocked the reigning world champs out of the tournament. After that loss, G2 rebuilt the roster with only keeping Pengu, Kanto, and Uno, and picked up Citizen and Virtue. But the roster was never the same, especially with the COVID pandemic hitting the world. G2 had never had another opportunity to win a grand final again until 2023 with a completely new roster. So that Penta G2 roster ended up with 4 Pro League finals, 2 SI Hammers, 1 major trophy, 1 DreamHack trophy, and 2 second place finishes in the Atlantic City Pro League finals and the Raleigh Major. This team was so dominant in its prime, and I haven't seen a team like it until I saw W7M. But W7M didn't have a very strong start to their reign. W7M first appeared back in 2020 with the Brazil League that year, but man, this team was bad. They finished in 7th place with only 1 win over a top 4 team in Brazil. They did have a bright spot though, and that was the young star in Herds. But outside of him, the team wasn't very good, with the rest of the team consisting of PRN, Freezow, Guy, and Panico. They did qualify for the next season of Brazil League, but with some changes to that roster. They decided to drop PRN and Freezow to pick up a rising star in KZ and a veteran in GDN1. But this change didn't do much for them, as they couldn't get a higher standing than 7th place in any of the 3 stages, and an overall 9th place for the entire season. They were the laughingstock of Brazil, and no one expected them to do anything. But after a horrible 2021 season, they came into the 2022 season with a changed mindset. W7M decided to make some more roster moves, and those were the droppings of Panico and Guy to pick up 2 young Tier 2 players in Volps and JV92 to pair with Kizi, Herds, and GDN1. These pickups, though, were what W7M were missing, as they dominated Brazil in Stage 1, with them only losing 1 game, and it was their last game after they secured 1st place and a spot in the Copa Elite 6 to find out who goes to the Charlotte Major. They did very well there, as they got 2nd place there after a loss to Liquid in the final, but they secured themselves a spot at the Major. The thing was that W7M was among the 4 teams at the Major that couldn't get visas to the US, which caused them to have to play in Mexico, so being at a disadvantage, the entire group stage caused an early exit from the Major. The next stage of Brazil, though, was another dominant affair for W7M, as they only lost 2 games and secured themselves a 1st place finish for the Copa Elite 6. Over there, they got 2nd place yet again after a loss to FaZe in the final, but they secured a spot at the Major in Berlin. That loss to FaZe, though, did start to show an early pattern, though, for W7M, and that was that they couldn't get past the other top Brazilian teams. This pattern did carry into the Berlin Major, but not in the group stage, as they only dropped 1 game and secured 1st in their group. In the quarterfinals, W7M beat a very scrappy Elevate team in a very close game to move to the semifinals to face FaZe, and the pattern showed up again, as they lost 2-0 to FaZe, but they improved, and that's what mattered for this very young but very promising roster. In Stage 3 of the Brazilian League, W7M made a surprising move with the dropping of GDN1 to pick up the legend Julio. They got 1st place again with only 2 losses to secure that spot for the Copa Elite 6. Over there, they finally got 1st place with a win over Liquid in the final to finally put a stop to the pattern and to give them a spot in Jokoping. At the Jokoping Major, W7M didn't drop a single map in the group stage, or even in their quarterfinals matchup against Black Dragons, but they had a test against Liquid as they dropped the 1st map against them. On map 2, though, they bounced back fast with a quick 7-0 to push it to map 3. But Liquid's experience prevailed as they won Villa 8-6, and W7M continued the pattern of losing to top Brazilian teams. After falling short 3 majors in a row, it was time for the 6th Invitational in 2023. Them and the Jokoping Major champs and BDS were the two favorites to win it all. And they proved that statement right as they won 3 games and only lost 1 in the group stage to put them into the upper bracket. And there they went on a run with them beating BDS, M80, Koi, and Oxygen, respectively, to put themselves in the grand final to face off the red-hot G2 squad led by their coach Fabian. In that game, though, W7M won Clubhouse as expected, since they could pick any map they wanted since they were the upper bracket winners. But after that, G2 dominated with them winning 3 maps in a row to lift the hammer. After a heartbreaking loss at the SI Grand Final, Volps left the squad for Liquid and Julio was dropped. But they picked up Philippox from MIBR and Nade from Black Dragons. At first glance, these pickups weren't eye-popping, but it was the complete opposite as they got 3rd place after a solid Stage 1 in Brazilian League. But they didn't look like a Titan yet. Then, Copenhagen happened. W7M swept the Swiss stage by beating Scars, Liquid, and Sonics to move to the main stage. In their quarterfinal match, they had a tough and close game against M&M Gaming, as they barely won Map 1 8-6, and then they lost Map 2 7-3, as M&M had all the momentum going into Map 3. For so we thought, as W7M dominated Villa 7-2 to move on to the semifinals, to where they faced Sonics. They schooled them 7-4 on Chalette and 7-3 on Oregon to move to their 2nd grand final in a row. This time they had to face their former teammate Volps and his new team in Liquid. But that didn't matter, as they won Skyscraper 7-5, Bank 8-6, and Chalette 7-3 to sweep Liquid to win their first major title. W7M finally got a title, but they weren't settled, as they got 2nd place in the Stage 2 Brazilian League to go to the Atlanta Major. In the Swiss stage at Atlanta, W7M had a slow start as they lost their first match to a surprising Geek team. Some people thought that W7M wasn't as dominant as we thought, but they quickly changed that thought as they won 3 games in a row against SSG, BDS, and Virtus Pro to move on to the quarterfinals. And there they had a rematch against Geek, and it wasn't easy as Geek got a map on them, but they eventually closed it out on map 3 to move on to the semifinals. Over there they had their revenge against G2, and they indeed got their revenge with an absolutely dominating 2-0 as they made G2 look like a tier 2 team. In the grand final, they had to face off against a red-hot Los team, who only lost 1 map up to that point, but that didn't seem to bother W7M as they won both map 1 and 2 convincingly to push it to championship point. But Los wasn't going to give it up easy as they won Bank off of amazing plays. But W7M ended Los' Cinderella run on Cafe with a 7-5 to get back-to-back major championships, but they knew the job wasn't finished as they had SI in 3 months. At the SI in Sao Paulo, W7M was put in the hardest group at the tournament, with arguably the best EU team in VP, Liquid, who they played in the Copenhagen Grand Final, the best APAC team in Bleed, and M80, who got 1st and 2nd in the 2 NA stages. W7M looked beatable in this group as they lost to Virtus Pro, almost lost to Bleed, and threw a 6-0 lead against Liquid. But they still got 2nd, despite those negatives. In their first upper bracket game, they had Wolves, and man, what a match this was, as Wolves won Oregon 7-5, but W7M bounced back on Chalette with an 8-7 victory. On Clubhouse, it was anyone's game, but Wolves prevailed 8-6 to push W7M to the lower bracket. But I think everyone knew deep down what W7M was about to do, and that was to run the gauntlet inside the lower bracket, and that was exactly what they did. They started out easy with a 2-0 victory over Firax, and then they got their inter-regional rival in NIP, but they handled them with a swift 2-0. But then SSG came along and stole Cafe, but on Chalette they handled business to win 2-1 to go on to the main stage to play in front of their home crowd. Their first main stage game, they put a whooping on Sonics as they got only a total of 5 rounds. They had one final test though before facing FaZe in the grand final, and that was Virtus Pro, who beat them in the group stage. But W7M started out hot with winning map 1, but VP bounced back on Chalette to push it to an insane border match that went to an 8-7 in W7M's favor to take them to the grand final. In the grand final against FaZe, W7M started out slow with a 7-1 loss on Oregon, but they woke up on Bank with a 7-5 win to tie it up 1-1. Then on Skyscraper, W7M started out 5-0, but then lost 7 rounds in a row to put FaZe on series point. But W7M wasn't going to end up like that, as they won Border 7-4. Then it went to Nighthaven Labs to settle who was going to lift the hammer. FaZe went all the way up to 6-1 to put themselves 1 round away from winning the 6th Invitational. But I think everyone had that feeling that W7M was going to do the impossible, and that was to push it all the way to OT. And that's exactly what happened, as they eventually won it 8-6 to win their first 6 Invitational and to solidify themselves as one of the best teams ever inside Rainbow Six. After lifting the hammer, W7M was picked up by one of the biggest organizations in Brazil, in Furia. And under their new org, they had a shaky first stage, but they still clinched a major spot with a 3rd place finish inside a Brazilian league. So it'll be very interesting if they can get another major. So, W7M Furia roster so far has 2 majors, 1 SI hammer, and 1 2nd place finish at SI. But now it's time to answer the question of who is the greatest dynasty in Siege's history. I think for now it's gotta be Penta G2 roster, only because they have 2 hammers and a bunch of Pro League finals, which basically adds up to the value of 2 majors. So to me, if Furia can win at least another major and another hammer, I think they'll pass Penta. But for now, I can say with confidence that the Penta and G2 roster is the greatest dynasty in Siege history. Sorry it's been a while, I've been dealing with school and work, but hopefully since I'm done with school, I'll be uploading more. But thank you for watching the video, and if you want more R6 Esports content, subscribe to the channel and follow my Twitter. And like always, God bless.
A feel of discontent, I finally face